To Edinburgh now, where the Scottish National Party's conference is kicking off today. The First Minister, John Swinney, is set to dive into what went wrong in the party's election campaign. The SNP dropped to just 9 seats in July, its worst return in over a decade. Let's cross to our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who is in Edinburgh at the conference. And Rob, you look at how things have changed for the SNP. I mean, 3 First Ministers in just over a year, dropping from 48 seats to 9. There's going to be a lot for them to digest.
Yeah, and I think the size, the scale of this year's conference probably reflects some of those changes that have gone on within the party in the last year or two. I mean, you think back 10 years to 2014 and the weeks after the independence referendum, and Nicola Sturgeon was selling out concert arenas in Glasgow, 12,000 people turning up to hear her speak. They're expecting about 1,500 people here at this conference centre in Edinburgh this weekend. I think that reflects the political turmoil of the last 18 months within the SNP. It reflects those dire results at the general election last month as well. And in terms of what they're looking at and looking forward to now, the picture isn't much rosier, to be frank. You've got the programme for government being set out by the First Minister, John Swinney, next week. And there's indications that pressures on public finances, much as we hear from the UK government in Westminster, are tight for the Holyrood government, for the Scottish government as well. And there's something of a blame game emerging between Westminster and Holyrood over who is to blame for that. John Swinney says that Labour is basically forcing a Conservative-style austerity agenda onto Scotland that they explicitly said wouldn't happen during the general election. But there is evidence from the Scottish Fiscal Commission, the spending watchdog here, who say that a lot of the blame can be laid at the door of the Scottish Government for expensive pledges like pay packets, pay deals with public sector workers, council tax freezes, that is partly responsible for stretches on the public finances as well. That's led to accusations from the Chancellor in Westminster, Rachel Reeves, towards the SNP government. And I put some of those accusations to John Swinney, the First Minister, when I spoke to him yesterday. Have a listen. Rachel Reeves is right, isn't she, when she says you're as much to blame as the Conservative government, the previous Conservative government, for quite simply overspending?
I'm afraid the Chancellor's completely wrong on that, because for every year that we've been in power, we've balanced our budget. We've lived within our means, so we've not overspent by a farthing. Now, if the Conservative government or the Labour government over those years...
The situation is so tight now. Doesn't that show that you've been spending on things in years that you simply couldn't afford? Like council tax and the council tax freeze?
No, because we've balanced our budget in every single year. So the claim by the Chancellor is just baseless, because we've lived within our means every year. The problem we've got this year is the effect of inflation. In terms of what's going on right now on the conference floor, in the hall, the doors are locked, media are not allowed in. There's an internal private session going on where they look through some of the research and some of the analysis that they've done about why they lost so badly in the general election or why they lost so many MPs last month. I think the challenge is clearly going to be to pick through that in a constructive manner and try and make sure it doesn't turn into, quite frankly, a bloodbath and essentially a round of finger pointing. Can they do that? Can they kind of keep it constructive and dignified, if you like? Then there is policy debate as the party starts to decide what policies they should adopt. Today there's a big focus on net zero. Tomorrow they'll be talking about drug deaths. One thing I think notable by its absence from the conference agenda is any proper resolution on independence or how to practically get another referendum. I think that may well irk some delegates here as well. What the First Minister has also talked about, though, is trying to inject some hope and optimism into proceedings. I think maybe it's trying to draw a battle line with Labour. The UK Labour government, the message coming from them is clearly quite doom-laden at the moment, so they maybe believe there's a battle line to be drawn there in the run-up to the Holyrood elections in 2026. I think the challenge there is, in such a sort of bleak position the party finds itself in, to what extent can it actually have much to be hopeful about?
Thank you very much indeed, Rob.